All right. Well, sorry I missed you guys last week. Next week, too, I'll be speaking to 900 pastors at the Billion Soul Initiative. I want to talk a little bit about that. One of my goals for this year for our doctors and people we train with, our teams, is helping get into churches. That was a lot of how I built my practice. Realistically speaking, that was the practice, the big 2,000 a week one. It was a church relationship with a lot of different churches. Most of the new patients came from a church. And then even when I went and built the second practice in Celebration and was doing that very part-time, we still had a very big practice, primarily coming from several churches in the area. So that is obviously, if the goal is to be this Christian chiropractor and bring a message to God's people, getting good with pastors and churches is pretty elemental. So I want to talk about that today, and then we're going to get into Dr. Matt. I don't know if you had other things to cover, but I wanted to get into finances today as we began the year. We've been working towards the end of last year, back to going through day 1, day 2, day 3, and really what, again, I now call part 1, part 2, part 3. So we've been discussing that process. And now, now the big thing is, of course, in the end, for most people, it's the money. It's been nice lately. I've had a couple of rich people come in that don't care about the money, and which is nice, but it doesn't happen very often. I've got 2 now in the last year that I don't care, just whatever it costs. In fact, I had somebody yesterday, she goes, "What do you mean that's all you're charging?" I'm like, "That's a great point. I need to raise my fees." So at any rate, I want to start with the church component. So first of all, as you've maybe heard me say, and it's an important piece to distinguish in your conversations with pastors. So I know pastors, and I just want to share this with you so that as you go to approach pastors and churches, I know it really well. I've been sitting on a board that oversees pastors from over 1,500 nations since 2003. So I sit in a lot of meetings with pastors and get to hear those pastors talk and share their issues and complaints and all the good things and bad things happening in their lives. Additionally, I was an elder in my church for 7 years. And so we would meet every week. All the pastors are there and hearing all the behind the scenes. So to understand not just what pastors are like, but also all their challenges to run that business. Because when you're in those meetings, it's no different than any business. They've got all the same challenges you have in your clinics, and then some, for the ones that are bigger churches. And plus they don't sell anything. So there's always economic issues because every penny they get means somebody has to be tithing and following God's plan for their finances. And that's not always the case. I don't know if you knew this, but the average person in church tithes less than $20. That's the average if across. So obviously somebody may be doing thousands and somebody's doing zero. So there's enough zeros to take that thousands down to $20 or less. So here you are trying to pay your staff, and you're trying to keep the lights on and do something creative for Sunday morning, and the average person is paying $19 a visit. So that's a little challenging to run your business that way. So that's one of the things to understand behind the scenes is they're trying to get new people. They're trying to get people to show up on Sunday mornings and during the week. They're trying to get people who will be part of a small group. They're trying to get people to donate their time and to be volunteers. And they've got economic challenges. Some churches seem to print money. Other churches, if you're a church of 300 and the average is only $19 a person on a weekend, then that's $25,000 a month for that big parking lot and that big building and that staff. That's likely not covering their expenses. So it gets pretty challenging. So just as we go to think of churches in 2020, a couple things to work on. Number one, it's all relational. I've had a lot of these conversations with Dr. Tyler, Dr. Joe, who you see sitting there before us today, because they're getting ready to start a practice, and are you developing relationships with key leaders in the community? So churches are very relational because there's a lot of trust involved. They're actually, and this was something that really, you got to know this because it's really stuck in the brains of church leaders and pastors, an expert years ago made a comment where he said that churches and hospitals, this was a secular comment. This wasn't even a comment that was designed for pastors to hear. This was something they were saying is just a truth about business in America, that hospitals and churches are the ones most prone to be damaged by one person's opinion. And what they mean by that is that in a hospital, it's that person that sues because they feel that the surgery or the doctor or the nurse or somebody did something wrong. In the church, it's, and this happens, this is not just abstract. In the church, it's, you go on stage and you say one thing. So I've been there in a meeting, in our elder meeting, the week after the pastor said something that didn't go over well. And the mass exodus of members is incredible. The amount of complaints and people pulling back their tithing. I mean, the disaster that can occur from one incident, one wrong move. And that's what that particular business expert said, is that churches and hospitals are one bad move away from a massive negative impact. So pastors are worried about that. So that's why that trust factor is so big. They have to know, Dr. Joe, I love this guy. I would go to bat for this guy, have his back. I take a bullet for him. I'm willing to put him up on stage, or I'm willing to put him in a small group leading it, or I'm willing to put him there on Sunday morning before church to lead one of our educational sessions. I'm willing to do that because there's trust there, and I believe in the product so much. I'm willing to take that chance. So there's a lot of trust, as you can imagine, before they'd be willing to take that chance. So number one for this year, we've got to just create as a habit, how are we developing that relationship with the churches? How are we developing that trust with the pastors and the leadership? Because that's a process. You can't go in and do that overnight. So I'm actually speaking at my church on Sunday this week. So they've handed me the pulpit, and that's, that's a lot of coffees, and I don't drink coffee. That's me drinking water and buying him coffee. That's a lot of, getting to know and donating my time and volunteering, various meetings, where I'm in just to help. And, it took, a couple of years before he's like, all right, I think we can do this. I think we can put Dr. Ben in front of our people and not lose our church. So there's time that goes into that. The second piece to the church component is consistency. So it's a timing thing. So our pastor, as an example, his health he's really struggled with his health the last few months. And that's really what began to make him think we should do something on health, because he's assuming, wow, about a lot of people need this. A year ago, he's feeling fine. His family's all healthy. And to him, what the heck would we do a health thing for? So a big difference occurred in a year. He suddenly had a lot of issues, and now he's ready for it. Additionally, in another church I'm speaking at here shortly, this is another example. They had no interest in health. And then actually there's the school system who they partner with said, we want to make 2020 a year about health. Do you have anything coming up that's a health initiative? Because we'd like to get behind you. So I got a call out of the blue. Hey, do you have a way to do this? I'm like, do I have a way to do this? This is my whole life. Have you heard of Body by God? And so, we now are doing another, not just a talk, but a whole year of work where I'm leading to partner with the school system in a health initiative. So, but a few months ago, that wasn't there, but because of my consistency in talking to these pastors, when it came up, I was the first person that they thought of. So the second thing is just consistency. You've got to constantly be out there because it's a timing thing. So don't be put off by the fact that, they may not be interested right now. It could come later. The third and final piece, just to work on for now, is find the people that are most available. What I mean by that is the pastor may not be all that available. He may not be interested at this point. maybe one of those situations where the pastor is sequestered away from the world, and it just takes a lot to get to him. So just connect with the most available person. As an example, there's a mega church, I tell the story a lot, that was literally, we shared a parking lot with. In my first practices, we were getting it over 1,000. And I really wanted to work with that church. And I just kept walking in, trying to go with the pastor. And, this is somebody that was like trying to get with Oprah or the president. There's just no way. They've got security that keeps you from ever getting to that guy. But every time I went in, I had a conversation with Dawn. And Dawn struggled with her weight, and had, a lot of different health issues, and she had 6 kids, and the kids had health issues. And so she and I became friends through the process of me trying to get past her to get to the pastor. And so she said, by the way, what is it that you want to talk to him about? And I let her know, about doing something with health at the church. And this is early on in my career, so I wasn't smart enough to have had this conversation with her sooner. And she said, well, why don't you tell me? She goes, I want to hear about nutrition. I've got at least a dozen friends at the church that want to hear about nutrition. We can just use this room right over here. I'll get a dozen people in there to listen to you. And so she set up a 12-week program herself without ever talking to the pastor, got her friends from the church in there. These happen to be all the people at the church that had the loudest mouths. They spoke to everybody and headed up all the gossip. I did a talk with these 12 women. It turned into hundreds of new patients, including all 6 kids, Dawn and her husband, right off the bat as patients. And I never did get to the pastor for years. And years later, he finally actually reached out to me and said, hey, I know you're seeing hundreds of my people. We're having a lot of problems. Actually, what he said was with depression. And he goes, I know that's has a lot to do with your lifestyle. He goes, he made the comment you may have heard me say before, where he said, we're thinking we don't need to take up an offering. We'll just turn the lobby into a pharmacy and sell prescriptions. He goes, so we really need your help. But that was years later, after Dawn, the front desk person, who's very accessible, she's sitting right in front of the door as you walk in the foyer, where she set me up with a talk. And the other really big mega church I get into, there was a very accessible pastor who oversaw the infants. So infants, toddlers, he oversaw that ministry, which really made him sort of the daycare on Sundays primarily, but he was an on-staff pastor. He also was in charge of setting up these talks on Sunday mornings before church started. So he and I developed a relationship, and he had me teach every Sunday in these, because he has them every Sunday. And he's like, you'll come every Sunday? He's like, we just need teachers. Like, I'll come every Sunday. So I did this for 2 years before the pastor walked into my clinic, and you may have heard me tell the story, holding the keys to the church and handed them to me. And he took them back. It was to be metaphorical. And he said, I'm turning my church over to you. We have to be the sickest church in America. And I've heard great things about your talks on Sunday mornings, but I want everybody to hear that. So what do you want to do, Dr. Ben, with my church to make it healthier? And we got, again, an untold amount of new patients, including a lot of the kids with cancer stories I tell came from that church. But it was a couple of years of developing a really strong relationship with a very accessible baby pastor, because I couldn't get anywhere near this guy. It was the biggest church in the county. You couldn't get anywhere near Pastor Blackwell, but I could talk to Pastor Jeremiah anytime I wanted, because nobody else wanted to talk to the baby pastor. So those 3 things, let's set a strategy in place this year that we're committed to those. Now, I will guarantee you that just from what, a little bit of the background I gave you about what pastors face, understanding what the church needs are, and beginning those 3 processes that I just shared with you, I guarantee you this year you're going to get into some churches, and it's going to make a big difference in your practice, in your community. And I just believe it's what God's called us to do. This is a godly group, and we're here to save God's children, those he loves so much. And the best way to do it, of course, is to be part of the body of Christ, working in the church community to do our part. Because the last thing, and I'll share this on next Thursday to 900 pastors, is the ministry of Christ was compassion ministry. And there's scripture to back this up, but Jesus's chief delight is the well-being of other people. His chief delight is to restore well-being. And that's why he's here. He said, that's why I came. He said his ministry, his compassion ministry, was blind eyes seeing, deaf ears hearing, lame walking, lepers being cured, the dead, those that are dead in their life being raised from the dead, and preaching the gospel. So that's how he described his ministry. His walk, his compassion ministry was healing, was people's well-being. It's what he says. He says thalo, which means it's why I'm here. It's why I came. So while the church is about Jesus, you see, I've got the divine light coming down from my screen as I preach here. The church is about Jesus, but the ministry is the reason Jesus came, which is compassion ministry, which has a lot to do with providing well-being. And so churches have a missing piece to the ministry if they don't have you there doing wellness ministry. Dr. Matt, anything to add there?